Before you start upgrading your vCenter server, it's important to ensure that you know the correct order of steps to upgrade the entire vSphere implementation. And when I say vSphere implementation, I'm talking about all the other VMware products that you might have running in your infrastructure, things like vRealize Log Insight, vRealize Operations Manager, Site Recovery Manager, VMware vSAN. There's a long list of VMware products that you could be using. And you want to make sure that you don't mess up something by updating these in just a willy-nilly order. So I've got 3 tips to help you follow when it comes to determining the correct order of steps to upgrading your vSphere implementation. The first one is to see VMware Knowledge Base article 7821, which actually lists out in a very specific order the update sequence for VMware vSphere, including vCenter, and all the other ancillary VMware products that you might have running in your infrastructure. Here you can see that knowledge base article, and if you scroll down, take a look at this very small chart, I know, but if you start at the left-hand side over here, there are numbers provided for each of the different VMware products, starting with a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all the way up to 12 over here. So if we start on the left, we have vRealize Lifecycle Manager is the very first thing that you should upgrade, followed by vRealize Log Insight, assuming of course you're using these products, and then vRealize Operations Manager, vRealize Network Insight, followed by vRealize Automation, and then any VADP-based backup solutions. For example, all the third-party backup tools use the vSphere API for data protection, so you would want to upgrade those next, followed by vSphere Replication, and then Site Recovery Manager, and then NSXT, and then we get to vCenter Server, followed by ESXi, VMware Tools, the virtual hardware, and finally, VMware vSAN and the VMFS. Now you might be saying, hey, wait, hold on a second, David. We just got done upgrading our ESXi hosts, our VMware tools, and our virtual hardware. And you are correct. We really should have upgraded our vCenter server first, followed by ESXi, then VMware tools, then the virtual hardware. Now, if we were performing a major upgrade, for example, from vSphere 6.7 to vSphere 7.0, then we could be running into some problems. However, in our case, we did a very minor upgrade from vSphere 7.0 to vSphere 7.0 Update 1 on our ESXi hosts. And in my experience with minor upgrades, you can really get away with this. It's more of the major upgrades that you need to be aware of this very specific order. So what we're going to be doing now is to upgrade our vCenter server. We don't have any of these other VMware products running in the vSphere infrastructure at the Wirebreak Coffee Company at this point. But if we did, we would want to make sure that we upgrade those first prior to upgrading VMware vCenter server. Another resource that you should be aware of is the VMware ESXi Upgrade Guide. This is actually a 96-page PDF that has tons of resources related to upgrading your vSphere infrastructure. Here's the upgrade guide for vSphere 7.0. And if you scroll down simply by looking at the table of contents, you can see how it provides you an overview of the vSphere upgrade process, specifically starting with backing up your configuration. And that's what we'll be talking about next. From there, you upgrade your vCenter server, then your hosts, and then your virtual machines. Of course, we're not going to review the entire 96-page guide here, but needless to say, if you're performing an upgrade in a production infrastructure, this is something that you do want to review and make sure that you're aware of all the caveats related to performing an upgrade. And then finally, my last tip is to use the new upgrade planner that's included with vSphere 7 and the new vSphere Lifecycle Manager. In fact, this is exactly what we'll be using after we perform our backup of our vCenter server, because it's going to walk us through the upgrade process and help us to prevent some of these types of mistakes that you might learn about in the vSphere Upgrade Guide. It's a best practice, of course, before you perform any upgrade to ensure that you have a solid backup. In our case, we'll need to back up the vCenter server appliance before we start the upgrade process. Now, thankfully, VMware has made this quite easy for us. If you go to your vCenter server appliance URL, :5480, and then log in with the root username and password that you configured when you installed vCenter. And if you go down to backup, you'll see that this is where you can use this interface to configure a backup, even an automated scheduled backup for the vCenter server appliance. Now, I'll tell you, I already tested this once right here and proved that I could get a successful backup before I demonstrated it for you in this lesson. So you won't have any activity listed down here. If you just want to perform a one-time backup, you can simply click Backup Now. However, to configure an automated scheduled backup, you would click Configure on the backup schedule. And then it's here, you'll first configure your backup location, which can either be an HTTP, FTP, SMB, or NFS share. In our case, we have an NFS NAS already. So we're going to configure this as NFS, and I'll put in the IP address for the NAS. And I happen to know the URL here is volume1/vol1. And then we'll call this new VCSA backup. We'll enter the username and password to access the share. And then notice how you can schedule this. By default, it will be scheduled daily, but you could schedule it weekly or on a custom schedule of some kind. In our case, let's keep the daily default. You could provide a password for encryption and choose how many backups to retain. By default, it will retain all backups. In my case, I'd like to just retain the last 2 backups to conserve disk space. We'll take the default to backup all the statistics, events, tasks, inventory, and configuration, which in this case will be roughly 5.5 gigabytes. We'll click Create. And now we have a new backup schedule so that we'll automatically backup vCenter server once a day and we'll retain the last 2 backups. But if we want to perform a backup right now, like we do before we perform our upgrade of vCenter, go ahead and click Backup Now, and then use the checkbox to use the configured backup location that we just created. You'll have to go ahead and enter the password. You could also enter a description, for example, before upgrade to vCenter 7.0 update 1, let's say, and click Start. All right, this will take a few minutes to complete. The last time I did it, it took roughly 7 minutes. So we'll pause the recording and be right back. And with our backup completed, as you can see here, successful, we're ready to start our upgrade process with the vSphere Lifecycle Manager Upgrade Planner. A new feature in vSphere 7 is the vCenter Server Update Planner. This is a very handy tool to help ensure that your vCenter server upgrade goes as smoothly as possible. When your vCenter server needs an update, thankfully, you will know it. You see here right on the top of the vSphere client, it gives us an alert that there are new vCenter server updates available, and you can click on View Updates right here. You can also look at your vCenter server, and right next to the version number, it says Updates Available, and this is also a clickable link. And if we click on either one of these, it will take us to the Update Planner. The Update Planner, of course, is also accessible by going to your vCenter server and then clicking on Updates in the Hosts and Clusters inventory. Here inside the Update Planner, it shows us the latest releases of vSphere, and you can see how these are sorted with the latest release on the top. You can also look at the version numbers and build numbers. You can see if these are updates or major releases. Also, the severity of these updates, whether or not a reboot is required, which in this case is very nice. None of these require a reboot of vCenter. And then release notes to each one of these updates. If we click on the link, of course, it's always good to review the release notes to find out what's new, what's been fixed, and any caveats that you need to be aware of before you perform this upgrade. Of course, if you also go over to VMware.com into downloads, you'll see that the downloads available for vCenter do line up, in fact, with the updates that are available here in the Update Planner. For example, the release date of build 17327517 is 1216. If we go over to vmware.com downloads, you can see right here, this is the same build number, and the release date is actually the very next day. But this is the build of vCenter that we are about to upgrade to. And here's where the real power of the update planner comes in. Here I can generate reports related to interoperability with other VMware products running in this vSphere infrastructure. That's something that we talked about earlier with the VMware Knowledge Base article, the specific sequence of upgrades to be performed. I'll show you how that report works here in an upcoming lesson. But for now, let's go ahead and perform our pre-update checks. And thankfully, it tells us very quickly here that there are no issues found. The pre-update checks have passed successfully. We shouldn't experience any issues updating to this latest release of vCenter. And to do that, it provides us a link here to the Open Appliance Management. Basically, this is the vCenter Server Appliance Management Interface. You saw this earlier when we logged in and we performed the backup of our vCenter server. I'm going to go ahead and log in as root again. And then on the left-hand side, you'll see a section entitled Update. And just like in the update planner over in the vSphere client, this gives us the same list of updates. And yes, we could have gone here first, but the point being, as a vSphere administrator, you'll likely be spending most of your time in the vSphere client. It's unlikely that you're going to be going over to the vCenter server management web interface to periodically check and see if there are new updates available. However, this is exactly where we will be initiating the update. Before we do so, we're going to move on to the next lesson and talk about interoperability reporting before performing an update. With most vSphere environments having multiple VMware products and solutions in place, it's critical to ensure that you perform the right sequence of upgrades in the vSphere environment. We learned about this in the VMware Knowledge Base article, but thankfully, the VMware Upgrade Planner, new in vSphere 7, can help to test the upgrade compatibility of your environment. Back here in the vSphere client on our vCenter server, specifically the Updates tab, if we go into the Update Planner, we can generate a report here specifically related to interoperability of other products. And when I say other products, I'm talking about other products in the VMware product lineup that could be running in your vSphere environment. Now, the interoperability tester will identify products that are running in the environment, but you can also manually add other VMware products if the interoperability tester doesn't find them, or if you simply want to ensure that your environment's going to be compatible. For example, maybe you're about to install VMware Horizon. You can modify the product list. You could select a VMware product like VMware Horizon 7 and perhaps a specific version that you plan to install, let's say 7.7, and we could add that. We could also test interoperability with other VMware products. For example, let's say VMware Cloud on AWS, version 1.6. We could add that. And then let's also test interoperability with VMware vRealize Automation, version, let's say 7.6. We'll add all of those. I'll click Done. And then the interoperability test runs again. The results tell us what version of the VMware products we identified are going to be compatible with our vCenter server. For example, we really need to make sure we're using vSphere replication version 8.3.2 instead of this 8.3.1 version that's currently running. If we really plan to use vRealize Automation, we need to make sure that we're running at least version 8.0 or greater. And for VMware Horizon 7, we need to make sure that we have at least version 7.12 running to be compatible with the version of vCenter that we're about to upgrade to. We need to make sure that we have version 7.12 of VMware Horizon running to ensure compatibility or interoperability. So that's the interoperability tester, which is a part of vCenter Upgrade Planner. I highly encourage you use the interoperability tester prior to performing any upgrades to ensure that all the VMware products running in your environment are going to remain compatible and interoperable with your version of vCenter Server. At this point, we've run the update planner, we've performed a backup of our vCenter server, we've checked for interoperability. It's now time to perform our upgrade of the vCenter Server appliance. To do so, the update planner will of course take us over to the vCenter Server appliance management interface. And it's here that you'll see the fixes that are available for vCenter Server. Now, don't fall into the trap of selecting the version that's on the top, because over here in the update planner, the version that was on the top was the latest and greatest. However, in the management appliance, for some reason, the version that's on the top is actually the oldest. So let's go ahead and resort these, and actually that didn't resolve it either. And if you make sure that you have this sorted by version, you'll have the latest release on the top. Of course, you want to check the latest release date, make sure you're using the latest version, assuming that's what you intend to do. And then you have two options here. You can perform a stage, or you can perform a stage plus an install at the same time. If you choose to just do a stage only, you'll be selecting the patches that will be installed at a later time. However, if you do a stage and an install, like we're going to do now, that will actually select the patches and then, of course, perform the installation. The first step here is to accept the end user license agreement, and then we'll run the pre-update checks. We'll need to go ahead and enter our administrator password. And then here it's recommended to back up your vCenter server. Of course, we've already done that. If you haven't, you'd want to do that now. In our case, we've already done this, so we'll check the box that says I have backed up vCenter server and associated backups. Now notice here it says the estimated downtime to vCenter server in this case is 216 minutes. So this is going to take over 3 hours to perform this update. Let's go ahead and click finish, which will initiate the update of VMware vCenter. With that, I'll pause the recording and I'll be right back as soon as this is completed. And with that, our installation has succeeded 100%. Installation complete. We got a green checkbox here. We should be good to go. I'll click close. And we're back here in the vCenter Server Management Appliance. Let's go ahead and click on History. And you can see in the history, we did apply this patch for vCenter to bring us up to the latest and greatest version to resolve any security issues and bug fixes. And now if we go back to our vCenter server, we'll need to re-log in, of course. And if we click on vCenter server, here on summary, we've got some warnings related to the recent upgrade that just happened. I'll go ahead and acknowledge those. And you can see we are now running version 7.01 with the latest build. If we go to updates, we have no new vCenter patches that need to be installed. So I would consider that a success. Now, one more bonus tip before you go, I want to point out that there is another way to upgrade your vCenter server. You don't have to use the vCenter Server Management Appliance. You can actually simply download from VMware.com the same installation ISO that you downloaded when you installed VMware vCenter. In fact, I've downloaded that ISO here, VMware vCenter Server 7.01. This is the same build number that we just installed. It's an 8 GB ISO image. And if I double click on this to mount it, and then go into the VCSA user interface installer for a Mac, since that's what we're running here, and then run the installer app, you could actually use the upgrade tool to walk you through the process of upgrading your vCenter server appliance as an alternative option to perform an upgrade. However, in my opinion, it's far easier to use the integrated upgrade tools in the vCenter Server Management Appliance. At this point, we've got our vCenter server upgraded. It's time to wrap up this module.